Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to do a really casual video chatting about lots of bookish things, essentially to like recap last year, so 2024, and talk about reading goals that I have for 2025. I also wanted to include my December wrap-up, kind of. What else did I want to talk about? And I also wanted to talk about a few books that I've already pre-ordered that I'm anticipating in this next year, this year that we're currently in. So my 2024 reading goals, I have a cup of tea by the way because I'm kind of tired. I haven't had tea in so long. This is just English breakfast tea with like milk in it. Ooh, I forgot how much I loved that. I usually drink coffee. Anyway, for 2024, I didn't set any specific goals for myself. However, I did do like a 12-book TBR list of primarily classics, which again, we'll get to in a second. But in 2023, I set myself a TBR list of 50 books. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm just gonna choose from this list of 50, it was like 52 books. I'm just gonna choose from this list of 52 books for this whole year because these books are books that I've been wanting to read for like a really long time. A lot of them were classics. I'm really excited to get to them. I'm just gonna choose from these books. Well, something that I learned about myself from that little experiment was that the second, and I should have known this because I've been like this my whole life, but the second that I feel like I have to do something is this second I'm absolutely not gonna do it. Like, I'm so stubborn. Yeah, it just made me ignore all of those books on that list. I mean, I started strong in January, but then after that I was like, no. So then in 2024, I was like, well, we're not gonna be that ambitious. We're just gonna pick a list of 12 books. I feel like that's easy, right? 12 months, 12 books, whatever. I should be able to do them. Well, I definitely didn't read all of the books on that list. And I feel like it's kind of interesting to like set a list of really random books. They're not that random because they're books that I've been wanting to read for a long time, but like essentially a list of random books that I'm like, I want to get to these at some point throughout the year. It almost feels like there's not much of a structure to it. Yeah, it just feels slightly chaotic, not like structured enough and like too large scale. Like, wow, I have too much time to do this is what I mean by large scale. And then again, I just end up ignoring it. And I feel like, and this is something that I'm trying to work on just in my life in general, but we're talking about books here. I feel like I really struggle with these two opposing philosophical concepts, shall we say, of like, life's too short, do whatever feels like the right thing to do in the moment. Do whatever you feel like you need to, you know? Like, don't structure these things. You don't need to do it. It doesn't really matter anyway. Like, do whatever you want. And also with the concept of like, I want to be structured, and I feel like having routine and structure really, really helps me if I stick to it, and it's like the right things, obviously, for me. I have to be honest with myself about who I am, you know? But like, if I have some sort of structure and I really stick to it, I do feel really good in the long run. It's like that difference between short-term gratification and long-term gratification, kind of. All that is to say, this year, this year I'm not planning on setting any like specific TBR lists, but again, we'll get into it. So I don't have like a list of books that like I want to read throughout the course of this year that are like classics that I've always been wanting to get to or whatever. Although that's always in the back of my mind. I mean, like every book that I own that I haven't read yet, I want to read it. You know what I mean? So we'll get to it when we get to it, I suppose. So to recap the books first before I jump into 2025 goals, to recap the books that I did read from my 12-book TBR list. And we're not going to talk about the books that we didn't read because we're going to be positive. The books that I did read off of that list, we have Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky, which I finished in January. I'm really glad that I read this. This was a book at the time that I read it, really brought me back into deeply thinking about what I was reading. It had me thinking about all these ideas that it was discussing. So I really appreciate this book for that. It's not one of my favorite books of absolutely all time by any means. But I did give it 5 stars, you know, I did love it. I loved the experience. So I'm really glad I got to Crime and Punishment, finally. Then we also read The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. this past year in 2024, which is super long. A lot of people last year read this book and a lot of people really loved it, which is great. I did not like this as much as I wanted to. I actually filmed a reading vlog, which I'll link down below, and I'm really glad I filmed that because now I have like this historical document of all my thoughts about this book, or some of my thoughts about this book at least. I didn't like this as much as I thought I would. Kind of disappointed. It was just too long. You'll hear what I thought if you so choose to watch that video. But yeah, I gave this 3 stars. The book kind of bugged me. But anyway, moving on. Then I also read Something to Do with Paying Attention by David Foster Wallace. I've always been curious to read a David Foster Wallace, but a lot of his books are like huge. And this is like not that huge, you know? And apparently this is like a novella that is supposed to be inside of another larger book that he wrote. I don't know specifically. But I wanted to read this again because it's short and I thought it'd be a good jumping off point. If I liked it, I could read more of his works. Parts of this I liked, but I think I'm really glad I did this because it did teach me. I'm probably not going to pick up any more David Foster Wallace. It was a lot about the taxes and stuff. And listen, I'm not going to lie to you, a lot of that stuff goes in one ear, out the other. Absolutely. I like reading for like the humanity side, like the humanity of things, and to hear characters' lives and their feelings and things about the human condition and what have you. I liked parts of that in this, for sure. That was definitely present. It was about the son and this father, and a lot of this like generation divide kind of set around the 70s, I think. Felt very 70s-esque. Yeah, Midwest in the 70s. So that was interesting, this like father-son relationship dynamic and the thoughts that they had of each other. But otherwise, it was just lots of like literally so specific droning on about taxes, and no thanks. So, and I guess he's like that in a lot of his books from what I've heard and understand. He like picks a topic and he's really hyper fixates on it in like kind of a boring, very specific way. Anyway, I don't know, not into David Foster Wallace, but glad I read that. Then I said I wanted to read The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. I did not read this, but I did read Sula, and I didn't own it at the time that I wrote this on that list. I just wanted to read Toni Morrison, so I'm counting this as a success. Boy, did I love Sula. Boy, did I love Sula. It made it on my favorite books of 2024 list. It's a favorite book of all time, absolutely. She's beyond phenomenally talented, and I cannot even. Another author who's beyond phenomenally talented, who made it on my best books of 2024 list that I literally just cannot even with, is James Baldwin. And I read 2 of his books in 2024. I put on my TBR list this one though, specifically If Beale Street Could Talk, because I owned it at the time. I bought this in July, I read this in July. This is The Fire Next Time. It's his nonfiction works about race in America in the 20th century, also kind of about religion and politics. And both of these made it on, did I say that already? I said that. They both made it on my best books of 2024 list. Well, I will reiterate, okay, I will reiterate. That was hard to say. But If Beale Street Could Talk was so beautiful. And I did actually just read this in December, which is a perfect segue into the next section of things that I wanted to discuss, which is my December reading wrap up, because I didn't want to do a whole separate video on that because I've already kind of talked about a lot of the books, or a couple of the books that I read in December in a few different videos. So I will move into that now. But yeah, those are the books that I read in 2024 that I'm really happy that I got to, because they were on my TBR list. And as for my December wrap up, we read these books in December. So again, If Beale Street Could Talk, absolutely loved that. And then I already talked about this in my November wrap up, so I'm not going to talk about it anymore, but I finished Intermezzo in December and loved it. That's another favorite book of the year. Also, okay, so I did read Playground in December by Richard Powers, which is another book that made it on my 2024 best books of the year list. So I talk about this more specifically in that video, which I just posted. But I mean, I truly believe that this book is a book that everyone should read right now. Do I think that everyone's gonna love it as much as I did? No, like, of course not. I don't think every person can love any specific book. But this was about, I'm grabbing my tea, sorry. This was about AI, progress, climate change, the oceans. Follow like 4 different characters that live in various parts of the world that are all very, very smart, very, very talented, and how they're all kind of interconnected with each other in different ways. And I just think that it is such a necessary read. I really, really, really do. And I loved it. And I loved that Richard Powers did not take a depressing tone when discussing climate change, how we are affecting our planet with the type of progress that we are causing and inciting and creating. I liked it. He seemed very hopeful. He seemed to take this stance like every species or planet Earth has evolved constantly throughout time, and we are currently in a new stage of evolution. It's kind of like what I took away from it, like his tonally. That doesn't have to be a bad thing. Like, we can do it better, and we need to be more mindful. But I really liked the perspective that I feel he took from this without being too blatantly obvious, or like too blatantly specific with his words and talking about his philosophy, you know what I mean? Oh my god, I love this. Also in December, and I'm going out of order, but I did read Blue Nights by Joan Didion, which was the last book that I read in 2024. This also made it kind of as an honorable mention for my best books of last year. And this is Joan Didion writing nonfiction about life after the death of her daughter. She's writing about getting older, what it is to be inside an aging body, what it is to be a woman in the world. And she's talking about life, she's talking about death. I think that I was a little bit bored in the beginning, but I just think Joan Didion is obviously so smart, you know, and she's such an interesting and intelligent woman to read from, to read her thinking about life. There's specifically a chapter near the end of this book where she's talking about getting older, being in an aging body and not being able to wear the same clothes that she used to wear, or not feeling comfortable wearing the same clothes that she used to wear. How people look at her on the street, how her body physically fails her when it's like her mind isn't, and how people treat you and talk to you. And I just felt so affected by that chapter. I cried so much. Yeah, I love Joan Didion. This was definitely sad. That was the second book I've read by her. I did read The Year of Magical Thinking, was her writing about life after the death of her husband, which sad life, you know what I mean? But also beautiful life. She did have beautiful moments. Then in December, I did also read A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. This was a reread for me. It's cute. You know, I'm not a Dickens girly, but it's A Christmas Carol. I think everybody knows what it is. This is so cinematic. I think I forgot that feeling because I hadn't read it in years. But it's so cinematic. Like, this is totally meant for like screen, and I think Dickens is pretty darn good at that, like making everything seem so like larger than life and grand and caricaturized and what have you. Kind of the ordinary feels a little bit magical in a silly way, you know what I mean? Yeah, Christmas Carol. It's whatevs. I read it again. Then I also read The Message by Ta-Nehisi Coates, another nonfiction book. And this book is about race in America currently. It's also about Palestine, the conflict in Palestine and Israel, and race, the concept of race in that context. Obviously this was extremely intelligent. I'm really glad that I read it. I think, and this is probably extremely unfair, but I just have to be honest, I think because I read The Fire Next Time this year by James Baldwin, and this has similar themes, it's a similar type of thing, it fell really short compared to that, with like how overwhelmingly powerful The Fire Next Time felt to read. Unfortunately, this didn't like blow my mind, you know? Anyway, Fair Talon is the last book that I read in December, and this was cute, but also sad AF and really emotionally affecting, okay? So this is set in a really small, is this Norwegian or Scandinavian? I know Fredrik Backman is translated. I think he's from Sweden. Is he Swiss? He lives in Sweden. Okay, so this is translated. Anyway, I do love Fredrik Backman. I've read A Man Called Ove. That made me cry. I've read Anxious People, which I loved, also made me cry. So his books definitely make you cry. You know, or at least they make me cry. But they're very heartwarming at the same time. They're like so heartwarming. And I think this man, I've never met him, but after reading 3 of his books, I think he's probably like one of the kindest people ever. And he's so good at writing emotionally affecting, readable stories. And I love that. I think that's fantastic. I do want to continue in the Beartown series. It's set in a small town called Beartown. And there's not much going on there. The only industry at all is hockey. It's a huge deal. All the men obsessed with hockey. A lot of the women also as well, but, you know, patriarchy. So a lot of the men obsessed with hockey. We follow several people from this town. We're following the adults and the teenagers, so the boys on the hockey team and their peers, and the adults that run this hockey club and the coach and their parents and what have you of the kids. And these kids, something terrible happens involving somebody on the hockey team, involving the daughter of the GM of the hockey team. And it's about how this town reacts to that. And boy, this book was just so sad and so like, it made me feel rage. And I feel like he captured really well, Fredrik Backman captured really well what probably would happen in real life. It's so friggin' upsetting. So, Beartown. I think I gave it 4 stars. But yeah, so those are all the books that I read in December. Let's talk about reading goals that I have for 2025. In no particular, I've numbered them, but these are obviously in no particular order. I just wanted to have some organization, you know what I mean? The first one that I wrote down is to read less / more mindfully. So I put this on this list because in 2023, okay, we're talking about history. This is what led me here, right? In 2023, I read like 60 books, which is still great. A lot of them were audiobooks, so I felt like I read less because I wasn't physically reading a lot, which is totally fine. Absolutely. I think that year I was really taking time to do different things in my life. Like I got really into weightlifting and working out, so I was spending a few hours a day at the gym at least 5 times a week, sometimes 6. And that takes up a lot of time, right? There's like preparing to go to the gym, there's being at the gym, there's showering, there's eating. It's like I had hours less time in the day to read. So it was very different. And then it also like, I felt like I started to have more energy too because of all that. And I started to, I don't know, put more time into doing other things with like people in my life and what have you, which is fantastic. That's healthy, full of balance. But I think at the end of that year, I was like, wow, I really want to get back to my love of reading, my hobby of reading. I want to read more. So in 2024, I read like 102 or 104 books or something like that, slightly over 100. And that honestly felt like too much now. Again, a lot of them were audiobooks, but I did read a lot physically as well as kind of keeping up all these other things that I was still doing in my life. Felt like a lot of the books that I did read, while there were certainly a good amount that were very impactful, what have you, and I gave my time to and were, again, impactful, I felt like a lot of the books I forgot about, you know, or they were more mindless reads, which is totally great. Huge fan of that, and I'm a big advocate for reading whatever the heck you want to read. But I think that it felt like a lot of noise and not a lot of meaning. You know what I mean? And so this year, going into 2025, I want to read less and more mindfully, like I said. So whatever the heck that means, I just want to take my time with the books I'm reading. I don't want to rush through them. I really don't want to think about how many books I'm reading, because of course I look at all these books that I haven't read yet, that I own, and I'm like, wow, I want to get to that, I want to get to that, I want to get to that, I want to get to that. It's not so much about reaching a number, it's just like I want to consume all of these things. And I feel like that really detracts from the experience of like what you do end up consuming, you know what I mean? You can't fully connect to it. You're not being as mindful about it. So I want to be more mindful about that. I also decided this year I wanted to track and log my audiobook reading and my physical book reading in different apps. So I'm doing my physical book reading in Goodreads, like I always use Goodreads, and then on Fable, which is a fun app that I actually don't interact with that much because there's just too much going on there. I like the simplicity, you know? I'm gonna track my audiobook reads on Fable just because it helps my brain feel better for some reason. I just like having that delineation. I feel like audiobook listening and physical book reading to me in my life are just like two different hobbies. So that just makes my brain feel more satisfied. So that's what I'm gonna be doing. Next, I want to theme my reading. Okay, because something that I did discover over the past 2 years was that I like being intentional about what I'm reading in small doses. So instead of making like a TBR list that I want to think about over the course of the whole year that's kind of not connected to each other, I liked last year picking a handful of books, like 5 to 7 books about Russia or something, or about Ireland, and focusing on those books at the same time, or maybe I'd end up reading 4 of them and then I'd be burnt out on the topic and move on. But like theming my reading, you know what I mean? I kind of like that. Or maybe not even just thinking about the specific country that it's coming from, but again, we'll get to that in a second. But theming my reading, whatever the heck that means, I want to do that this year. So I think setting monthly TBRs for myself is good. I think that works for me, but not being like extremely strict with it. Like I have to get to all of them, but just like, these are the books that I currently want to focus on. I can do that for this next month, these next few weeks, and then I can move on and do something else, right? And I don't have to get to all of them if I feel done with it at a certain point, or if I feel satisfied with where I've gotten. I also want to focus on more individual authors. Now, I was inspired to write this down because last year I saw a bunch of people, I think on like TikTok or YouTube Reels or something, mention that something that they do each year is they pick an author and they read their entire backlist that one year. So it's like the year of Toni Morrison, the year of James Baldwin, the year of Kurt Vonnegut, whatever. And I was like so inspired by that. I'm like, wow. And I can't focus that long on like one person for the whole year, but I really liked that idea, right? Because I'm going to use Kurt Vonnegut as the example, and also Virginia Woolf as the example because I just looked at them, you know? But I looked at their books. I don't have them in my house, but I looked at their books. I don't have the people in my house, but I looked at their books on my shelves. You know what I mean? I love those 2 authors, and I've read, I don't know, like 8 of Kurt Vonnegut's 16 books, and I've read 3 of Virginia Woolf's 7 books, or whatever it is. It's like, I think a part of me is not wanting to run out of their books, but also it's like, I can reread them. You know what? I'll probably get more out of them the second time that I read them. And if I love these authors, I want to be aware of their oeuvre. I want to be aware of their back catalog. Like, why am I being silly? You know? So I really was inspired by that concept, and I want to focus on it. So maybe if I read a Toni Morrison book again this year, which I'm obviously hoping to. I loved Sula. I probably will, you know? Read a couple more afterwards if I'm kind of like on that hype train. Why not? Or like around the time that I read it. Be more intentional. Next, I want to pay attention to the nonfiction books that I have because I got really excited about nonfiction last year. I think because, well, in the first half of the year I got excited because of the Women's Prize for Nonfiction prize list that came out, and I was like, I'm gonna be a nonfiction reader, woo! And these books all sound interesting, yeah! And so I bought a bunch of books. I bought the whole short list, actually, except for one book, and I only read one of the books because realistically, I have not built up that nonfiction muscle in my reading brain, and it is a muscle that I have to work, right? And then the second half of the year, I did get excited about nonfiction again. I was like, I'm in the mood for nonfiction books, so I bought a few more, And I'm like, I'm gonna hopefully read some of these nonfiction books this fall. And I did. I totally did. I read like maybe 3 or 4, whatever, which is great. But I want to be more intentional about picking up some nonfiction this year. And I don't want to buy anymore, which again, we'll get to that point in a second. So try reading more nonfiction because I have it and I do want to read it. So just to actively push myself to pick it up. Yeah. I also don't want to get sucked into book prizes this year because I am notorious for doing that. And it makes me just buy a bunch of books that I wasn't previously interested in because I'm just all hyped on it. That's fun. It's certainly fun, but I don't want to do that this year. Because by the end of that, I'm like, I hate these books. I hate reading. I don't actually hate those books, but I like try to read all of them so fast and then I just hate it and I hate the activity. And I'm like, why did I do this? I didn't need to do this. So I don't want to get sucked specifically into the woman's prize. That's the one that always gets me. Okay, that's the one that always gets me. It has since I was like 16 years old. 17. I don't remember how old I was, but I think it was 17. It has always gotten me since then, and I really don't want that to happen again this year. I'm fine with the Booker. For some reason, I don't want to buy all the books on the Booker list or the Booker International, but that one kind of gets me a little bit too. Not as much as the Women's Prize, but it comes out the same time as the Women's Prize, so that's why. Anyway, so I don't want to get sucked into prizes. Next goal is to read the books I own, which ties into another one later on this list, which I'll bring up. I don't want to buy any books this year, and realistically that's not going to happen, so my rule is I can only buy 1 book a month. And another rule is every book that I do buy, I have to read the month that I buy it. And I want to be so strict with myself about this. And I think my word of the year that I've been trying to repeat to myself already in the first couple weeks, first month of this year, is discipline. Like, seriously, I feel like I'm entering this stage of my life where I really want to have more discipline, and I like, not even just as an idea, like I genuinely feel like I need it, like to heal something inside of me. Like I feel like I want it, you know? So I want to keep repeating that word to myself. Like things aren't always, and that takes me back to the concept that I was kind of mentioning in the beginning of this video of like instant gratification versus delayed gratification. And I don't want this instant gratification anymore. Like, I feel like it's akin to eating a bunch of sugary foods that sound delicious in the moment and taste great while you're eating it, but they just don't give you any nutrients and they make you feel terrible. And don't get me wrong, I like my sugary foods in small doses every now and then, but I just want to be more disciplined because I do believe in the long run it makes you feel better. So again, I meant that as like a concept, not just with food. I'm not talking about food, but I was using that as a conceptual example. With book buying, specifically is what we're talking about now, but yeah, it's not always fun. Sometimes you're like, wow, I really, really, really want to buy this book, but I'm like, do you really want to buy this book? Because sometimes you buy a book and like you feel sick afterwards. You're like, I didn't need to do that. I have so many books at home that I want to read. Of course I want to read this as well. All these books sound great. Books sound great all the time because you love books, you know? But read the books that you own. You will feel better about yourself at the end of the day for like doing what you claim you want to do. You know what I mean? So that's something that I want to be really disciplined about this year. Another caveat to that, two other caveats to that, which then again, yeah, 2 other caveats to that is, so I only want to buy 1 book a month, excluding pre-orders that I've already pre-ordered a couple of months ago, which there's like 4 or 5 books, which I'll talk about in a second. So I'm not going to include those as like books that I've bought that month. But also any book that I buy, I have to read the month that I buy it. So pretty much right when I buy the book, I want to read the book. And if there is a prize list that I'm excited about, you can only buy 2 books from the long list. So there are a couple loopholes to this because I need to be realistic with myself. And so that's kind of how I'm framing it to myself, okay? So those are my rules for the year, the things that I want to be really strict with myself about. Yes, and last but not least, a random intention that I have for this year, goal, I guess, is to read some Shakespeare because I do really like Shakespeare. I haven't read any of his plays in a couple of years, like, yeah, 2 years, and I have a lot of his plays that I haven't yet read, and also there's so much to get from his work anyway. The ones that I have read, I want to reread at some point. So I just want to read some Shakespeare is all that I wrote on the list. Whatever that means, I want to do that. For the last section of this video, I do want to talk about the 5, okay, there's 5 books that I have pre-ordered for 2025. The first book that I pre-ordered is Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros, which comes out January 21st. I'm excited for it. Okay, I'm excited for it. Yeah, it's the 3rd book in the Fourth Wing series. The funny thing with the Fourth Wing series is, like, I've rated both of the first 2 books 3 stars, and, like, I don't think they're good, but, like, I don't want to like them. I don't even think like them is the right word. They get me, you know, like, they're so entertaining, but I know that objectively they're not good. But, like, I'm also here for it. You know what I mean? So, Onyx Storm. The second book that I have pre-ordered is Glyph by Ali Smith, which comes out February 4th of 2025. I love Ali Smith. Okay, I love Ali Smith. I haven't loved every single book I've read by her, but I do love Ali Smith. I love the way she writes, very stream of consciousness. She has a super unique style and she plays with form and words and language. From what I understand, it's about AI a bit. Technology, I'm really interested in that topic currently. So yes, I have that pre-ordered. Third book is Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez, which comes out April 1st. Of course I pre-ordered this. I love Abby Jimenez. I don't even know what this is about, but it's a contemporary romance, and that's all I need to know, and it's Abby Jimenez. Next is Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry, which comes out April 22nd. Again, I don't know what this is about. I don't care what this is about. I love Emily Henry. I'm so stoked about this. So, yeah, I pre-ordered it. And last but not least, I pre-ordered A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping by Sangu Mandana, which comes out July 15th, which this date I've noticed has been pushed back like 3 times. So it might get pushed back again. I don't know. It's supposed to come out like December 20 something in 2024, and it didn't, obviously. So we'll see, but currently it says July 15th. I don't really know what this is about either, other than it's a witch's guide to magical innkeeping, obviously. I listened to her other book, The Secret Society of Irregular Witches, and I just thought it was so cute and adorable and magical and like a cozy romantic-y situation. And I want to physically read this next one because as I was listening to it, it felt like a book I'd probably prefer if I physically read it. So that's why I pre-ordered this. It's also in paperback, so it's totally cool. And I'm excited about it. We'll see how it goes. Again, don't really know what it's about. But yeah, so that's my little book chat. Lots of things that we talked about. Thank you so much for spending some time with me. Please let me know how you're doing, what you're reading, what's going on, maybe what your goals are for 2025. I've heard a lot of people, funny enough, mention that there are a big goal of theirs for 2025 is to read less, which I find kind of interesting that a lot of people have been saying that, and I feel that way as well. But yeah, what are your goals? Do you have any specific books that you want to read? Do you have like book buying goals or not buying goals or what have you? What are you looking forward to too? Like, what are your most anticipated releases? Do you like to read new releases? Tell me what's up. So again, thanks so much for watching. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. And I hope everybody has a great year. It's been an interesting one. so far. I do live in Los Angeles, so it's been kind of interesting, to say the least. And my heart, and I'm gonna cry. I cry too much. My heart goes out to all the people in the Los Angeles area. I know it's been an extremely stressful time at my work. A lot of my clients that have been coming in have been like just crying, So, yeah, that's been interesting. I've been hearing a lot of people's stories and feelings, and there's just a lot of anxiety. So, I'm hoping for the best. Nothing lasts forever, so hopefully things get better, but I do feel a lot of things. Okay. Yeah, again, thanks for watching. Bye, guys.